Hello and welcome to the 38th episode. My name is Ryan Blake, I'm the founder and director of Extreme Sports Performance. In this episode we're talking to Nigel Briers. Nigel is an ex-professional cricket player for Leicestershire County and the director of sport at both Marlborough College and St Paul's School. We ask him the questions we ask all our guests: who he is, what he does, where's he come from and what has he done along the way, what are the key moments from his career so far, what are his top areas of interest, what are the most valuable things he's learnt, who are his top influences, what are his top resources for information, what are his top pieces of advice in life, exercise and sport, and finally, where can people find him. We freestyle a lot in between questions as normal. Really enjoyed recording this one from Nigel, found it very insightful. I hope you do too and enjoy listening. Nigel, thanks for joining us on the Extreme Sports Performance podcast today. It's a pleasure to have you on the show. Please could you start by telling everyone who you are and what you do?
I'm Nigel Briers. I was a professional cricketer with Leicestershire for 25 years, from 1971 to 1995. I taught at Marlborough College for 19 years, 95 to 2015, and then at St Paul's School, London, for the last 6. During my time at both schools I was director of sport and director of cricket. I'm retired now, although I'm still involved in some cricket coaching, but mainly at St Paul's School.
Fantastic. Well, thanks very much for that intro. So could you give us a little bit more of an idea of where you've come from and what you've done along the way up until now?
I've been privileged to work in 2 very prestigious private schools, but I actually come from a working class background, and Mum was the dinner lady at my infant school, and Dad left school when he was 14 to work as a floor layer. He was in the Royal Marines during the Second World War, and on D-Day, first wave, and then the Far East with Special Forces. He then went back into the building trade. I have an immense admiration for him as he made his way up until he ran the company. He was a great role model for me, and he had leadership qualities. These were very evident in my early years when he was a successful captain of the local cricket team. I think this had a profound impact on me, really, watching Dad lead the team and in a no-nonsense style, and I think the latter transferred itself to me to some extent. I attended Lutterworth Grammar School and trained as a PE and history teacher at Borough Road College. I think that's part of Brunel now, before becoming a full-time professional cricketer. Before I was full-time in education, I spent the winter months teaching PE and history at Ludgrove School in Berkshire. That was quite interesting because Prince William and Harry were there, so I'm by royal appointment, you see. That school was very good to me and allowed me to come and go for almost 15 years while I was playing cricket, so I was kind of indebted to them for that.
Of course. So, it sounds like there's a lot of things you've done, a lot of different places. But if you had to pick out any key moments from your career, what would you say the main ones would be?
Yeah, it's quite interesting because thinking about all this and chatting to you, you think, there's a few things been going on here, but things that stand out for me, I guess, are playing for England schoolboys at cricket for 2 years and captain the side against India in my second year with them. I was also captain of the England under-19s, British colleges, and captain of Leicestershire under-19s and under-15s. So I suppose I had a bit of a grounding in leadership there, and which also led on eventually to being the leader at Leicestershire. Playing professional cricket for Leicestershire was a dream come true.
Yeah.
And captaining them for 6 years was a real honour. We beat Essex in the Benson Hedges Cup final at Lords in 1985 when David Gower was captain, and that was a great day. I also led the side to their first NatWest final at Lords in 92, but sadly we lost that one against Northamptonshire. But they were a very good side at the time. I think another thing that stands out for me is leading the team to runners-up in the county championship in 1994. I think they'd only ever been runners-up once before that.
Yeah.
That was a proud moment, as no one had given us a chance at the start of the season.
Yeah.
And I actually pinned something up on the notice board in the dressing room where they'd written us off, and they'd guessed what the county championship would be and put us somewhere down towards the bottom. So I pinned it up so everyone could see it and put the highlight pen through it. So that was kind of a great year, really. I captained a strong MCC team to the Leeward Islands in 1992, and in the same year I was awarded Captain of the Year by the Wombwell Cricket Lovers Society, which went up north to receive. However, I think the best thing, my proudest moment really was, and very flattered to be made one of the Wisden Cricketers of the Year in 1992. You know, there's only 5. You can only win it once, and there's only 5 in any given year. And I think that was as much about not just my longevity as a cricketer, as a player with Leicestershire, but it included some of the stuff about leadership and captaincy. So I was quite flattered by that as well. I think if I look back at my career, I think I must have done okay, but I always feel that, or felt that I should have done better or could have done better. But humbled to play in periods when not only the best players in the world played county cricket, but many were the greatest of all time. So I think looking back at that gives me enormous pride and pleasure when I sit back and think about it. I think at the time you don't realise, you're just doing your job, and you don't realise that, well, actually I must have done all right, but I didn't think I was that great. So sometimes there was that confidence issue, I think. I've also really enjoyed being head of cricket and director of sport, you know, since finishing cricket at 2 of the leading independent schools, you know, which has given me a great living and meet lots of great people. And it's also given me a different perspective on leadership and dealing with everyday people from all walks of life, you know, and different types of teachers and that, rather than just professional athletes.
So throughout that very, very vast and diverse experiences that you've had, who would you say the top influences were on you, if any, stand out?
Yeah, I think my environment when I was brought up, so mum and dad, and I spoke about Dad earlier as a role model, but mum actually was the scorer for the cricket team that Dad was captain of, so, you know, it's all in the family.
Yeah.
Mike Turner, who was the secretary manager at Leicester County Cricket Club, was like a father figure to me, and especially as a young player, because I was there from age 15, 16. So he had me in his office once, and he said, when I'd been captain in the side, and he said, what's all that gesticulation you're giving out on the pitch and things like that? And I said, I didn't realise I was doing it. I said, you don't need to do that. You got enough presence. You can just go about things in a tidier way, or worse to that effect. And I think sometimes people like that, and you think you're doing all right, you know, you're captain of the team, and someone just to nudge you a little bit and just put you back in your box a little bit and remind you where you're at. Yeah. And I thought that was really good. But he was great. And Railingworth, who died recently actually, was a former captain of Leicestershire in England, one of England's best, I think. No nonsense approach. He was very tough, very empathetic. So I was brought up under him. So I kind of blame him and my dad really for me being if I'm a bit too tough sometimes. Yeah. But Maurice Hallam was and Jack Birkinshaw were 2 of my coaches when Maurice Hallam was a former captain of Leicester, boyhood coach. Jack Birkinshaw played a lot of years for Leicester, was in England, manager at Leicestershire during my time as captain, but he was also a boyhood coach. So they had influence over me in different ways. And Bobby Simpson, who came from Australia, was captain of Australia, and he became coach at Leicester as well as coach of Australia, and I learned quite a few things off him too. They were big influences. I also think of Jimmy Biddler as head of PE department at Borough Road with my time there. So not forgetting the teaching side, that they all had leadership skills. They had a certain presence about them. They influenced me in different ways. And then headmasters, the first one at Marlborough as Ed Gould, and when I came to St Paul's, Mark Bailey had played cricket for Suffolk and rugby for England, and professor in ancient history, and the sort of they were quite impressive people, and
Yeah.
dynamic, and had something to offer you. I do feel that I've learnt from lots of people I've met, though, not just leaders. The way these are, the way that people are, their personalities and that, and the way they react with me, and it almost helps you build up an encyclopedia of leadership knowledge. In a way, you're almost learning all the time from different people, and empathising with them.
Of course, yeah. Oh, fantastic! No, that's really interesting. So, would you say you had any top areas of interest in the things that you've done in the past and the things that you do now?
Yeah, I had a couple of poor seasons in '84 and '85, and sort of lost a bit of confidence. Then broke my arm in '86 on this wet-ish pitch at Hove, and I moved my arm guard up, but the ball actually hit me very low down on the wrist, and I think I was in plaster about 4 months or something. But during that period, and I needed to fight back from this, and I think some people had ripped me off, and I got to know somebody, and I became acquainted with self-hypnosis and positive thinking, visualization, and mental rehearsal. Now, these days, everyone talks about that a lot more, but back then, it was something quite new and I'd heard a little bit about it, and one or two cricketers had worked with some. So I worked with this sports psychologist, and it made a massive difference to me. And I'm sure it gave me another 10 years successful in the game, and learnt sort of relaxation methods and visualizing. So if we were playing, I've never really mentioned this before, but about a week or 2 weeks before we played Essex in the semi-final at Leicester in the NatWest Cup, which we actually won, I sort of visualised the bowlers and playing in that game, and winning the game and getting Man of the Match award, and Leicester get to the final, you see. And I saw myself batting and visualising playing different shots, because you knew the bowlers were going to be from Essex. And sometimes it almost made it happen, that positive thinking, because we did win the game, and I think I got 80 odd runs. Nasser Hussain caught me great catch, and I got Man of the Match award. And it's moments like that you think that mental rehearsal did me a lot of good. But you have to work hard at it. It's not something you just dabble with and think about for a few minutes. It really does become quite taxing at times.
Of course.
So since then, I've been interested in reading further on that, and the power of positive thinking and the psychology of sport. And it actually dovetails quite nicely when I've had leadership roles.
Fantastic. I think at the moment, some athletes tend to be a bit nervous about going down that sports psychology route. I think mainly that's because there's quite a lot of unknowns. If for anyone who was thinking about going down that route, would you have any kind of advice or quick tips for them about what to do, how to do it, when to do it?
Yeah, I think it's something that is learned, and I think it takes months. I mean, I worked really hard at it and read about it and how to do it. And I think it's certainly, especially after I'd broken my arm, and I used to have this tape that used to say, you're a top class batsman, you love playing against fast bowling. So it was almost instilling that into me. And these tapes would relax me. I'd go off to a beach, it'd take me to a beach or something, and I'd be all relaxed. And in the end, I was falling asleep and waking up at the end of the tape, and all the positive affirmations were going in. So it's that subconscious, and a lot of people the cricketers I knew, they get naught, or they go through a struggle through a bad patch, and they go for a run. So they just go for 2 or 3 mile run, come back in the shower, feel better. But actually, you've not improved you might have got rid of that tension, but you've not actually improved your mental skill level to deal with things going forward. Whereas working with this tapes and the psychology and going into your subconscious and working at it like on a regular basis, I think that can turn your mind into the right way. You know, I mean, the top psychologists would tell you much more detail about this, but that's the way it worked for me. And I think if you are struggling with a little bit of confidence, or you've had an injury, I think, you know, positivity and working with visualization, for me it worked. I never talked to anyone about it at the time. I think this is the first time I've ever talked either in the media about this sort of thing. So you just, because otherwise, if people know you're doing it, they're looking for it, and they'll say, "Well, it ain't working, is it? Look at him; he's not doing very well." But so you don't tell them; you just get on with it.
But you have to be prepared to fully commit to it.
Yes, I mean, I did. I think every evening in the summer when I was playing, I'd visualise about shots or whatever, and the bowlers I was playing against in the next match, and see positive things happening. And after training in the mornings, I might come home, have a bit of lunch, and put the tape on in the afternoon, and fall asleep, and I've got this going on. So during that period, it really helped me. And I think the longer you play in cricket, or probably a lot of sports, it'll be interesting to see what other people think about this. But self-doubt does creep in. The longer you play, you've got nothing to lose to begin with. You're out there and you're doing it, and then suddenly you hit a standard, and you've got to keep maintaining that standard.
Yeah.
And that's what I think. And then a little bit of doubt just creeps in now and again. And so I think it worked for me.
Brilliant. So, based on everything we've discussed so far, what would you say the most valuable things you've learned are from all your experiences and all your different roles and all those different environments?
Yeah, quite a few things, I guess, really. I mean, I've always tried to understand what makes a good leader, you know, and things like humility and having courage, and not just physical courage, mental courage to make decisions, and, you know, you're not always going to get it right. Respecting everyone, having a high worth ethic, seeing the detail, not flimsy, but you've got to see that detail, and having positive energy, self-discipline, enthusiasm. So you read about all these things like that in most leadership books and that, and I think I sort of every now and again will read something, and it's not rocket science. It just reminds us that, you know, am I working in that way? Am I doing that? And I think enjoyment's so important. What you do, you got to enjoy it, and if you're enjoying it, your team's enjoying it, and they need to enjoy it. I think I've learnt that you can't please everyone. But I think earning respect is more important than being like really popular. Sometimes it's nice to be popular as well, but I think respect, if you're respected, I think that's a good thing. And staying calm under pressure. It takes me back to I was filling in for David Gower. I was vice captain. He'd gone off to play for England, and we played. It was Essex again, actually, in a Sunday league, and they were one of the best teams in the 80s and 90s, especially in one-day cricket. And we were winning this game very easily on this particularly 40-over Sunday league game. And then there was a bit of a run-out, and then I think I ended up sort of getting a bit flustered, and I think I kicked the chair, and I did something, and then somebody else went out, and then there was another run-out. And looking back, I think we had 3 or 4 run-outs in this game, and we ended up tying it when we should have won with about 4 overs to spare. It was, I can't remember the exact details, but I look back at that, and my tension that I created in that dressing room. So we lost that game. You know whose fault it was? It was mine. It weren't the lads who went out and tried to get the runs and got run out. I think I'd instilled that tension amongst them. And I learnt a big lesson that day,
Yeah.
that you've got to stay calm under pressure, and you know, and just, even if you're feeling it, you've got to not show it, and make sure your team are feeling good about themselves. And I think that was at a time also when I was starting to do this sports psychology stuff as well. So I think it made me reassess things. But that was quite an interesting, poignant moment. I think I've learned to try and listen, not just talk. I think that's important with leaders, and preparation. I'm a great believer in that. You know, don't be late. And I went on an MCC tour to the West Indies, and Johnny Barclay was a former captain of Sussex. He's a top man, and he was our manager, and he laid down the rules in a terribly nice way, because he's such a nice bloke. And he said, you know, if we're late, we're leaving you, so don't be late in the mornings. The bus leaves at a certain time, and we're off. And so fine, okay. So we're all there. We're ready to go. I think it was Anguilla we were off to play this match against the Leeward Islands, and a couple of minutes, 5 minutes had gone, and manager's not there. So I said to the driver, right, we're off. So we left the manager behind, and but he told us that, you know, if you're not there. So I thought, is he testing me? So I said, right, we're going. So he turned up a little bit later, and I think he must have got a taxi, and he says, well done, absolutely right, he said. Yeah, so, but it was one of those moments, and I think that sort of thing, and having the self-discipline to be on time, and I can't remember what his excuse was, but it was quite funny leaving the manager behind. I'm a great believer in loyalty, both giving it and hopefully generating that. It doesn't always work out like you want it to with some of your people you work with, but I think linked with that is patience. You know, excellence takes time. It's not a quick fix. So being patient as a player, individual, being patient as a leader is important. And honesty. I think over the years you learn you just can't go wrong if you're honest and upfront about things, and also don't be afraid to admit you were wrong. You know, you come across people who like make excuses, or it's other people, just stand up and, you know, yeah, I didn't get that right today, that was my fault, and I'll be better tomorrow. So I used to be afraid to make mistakes, and I think that's what happened when I had that period in 84, 85, 86, when lost confidence, and that sort of cost me a few seasons there as a county cricketer. But and you read about this, don't you? Mistakes make you stronger, and I think that's, you know, anyone listening to this and all that is. I used to worry too much about those mistakes. I can remember Railingworth was captain. We were playing at Worcester, and I dropped Glenn Turner, New Zealand Test player. Went straight up in the air. This ball did. I was so high, all blue sky. It's on the television. Come down with snow on it, and I didn't lay a hand on it. You know, like when there's deep blue skies, no clouds, and I think I did a triple sulco or double twist or something, and never got anywhere near it. You know, rather than, and I can see Illy stamping his feet, and you know, and that's you know, one of those things. And then I was on the boundary down in front of the ladies' stand, and Phil Neal were batting. I remember a good player, captain of Worcestershire later on. And he hit this ball straight to me. It went straight through my hands, hit me on the side of the jaw, and went for 6. And I can see Illy stamping his feet again at me. And I think it did bruise me a bit, you know. And you felt a bit you know, like. But he basically, you might as well go off the field, he said, or something like that. So I did. And he was great, because he used to pick me up in the village. He'd drive me. I spent a lot of time with him, and I learnt a lot from him while we were travelling. But you know what? He didn't take me home that night. I had to get a lift with someone else because we lost the game. And I think all in all, we dropped about 12 catches that day. So I had to get a lift with someone else. So you know, and that stayed with me for far too long. You know, on the TV, dropped a couple of the fact I got 80 odd in the game meant nothing, because I felt, and you just got to deal with that. And I weren't the worst fielder. You know, like I was used to field at cover a lot, but that day it sort of knocked me back a lot. I think other things like don't try and be someone else, be yourself, bring your own qualities to the job, bring your own personalities to the job. Yes, you can read about what makes a good leader and this, that and the other, but you've got to feel it, and you've also got to be yourself and not try and copy someone else. You know, I can remember growing up and thinking Richie Benaud's so calm, you know, captain of Australia, Mike Gattin, pugnacious, aggressive, different styles, successful leaders, but different types of leadership that suited their personalities, you know. And empathy, I've learned that empathy is so important. How would I feel if I was in my team? How would I feel if I spoke to myself like I speak to other people? There used to be a local cricketer who played in my dad's team, and he always saw, whenever I saw him later, you know, in retirement or whatever, he used to say, you know what he said, your dad always used to ask how the family was and how my daughters were. You know, he never forgot. He always used to mention them and check with me how they were, you know, and that had a real impact on this local cricketer, and he was so impressed with that about my dad. And I think I've become better at this over the years, that you know, the human side of things, and how are people, how are they, and how's their family. You know, there's a human side to leadership, and it's not just always just about having to win or what under, you know, win at all costs sort of thing. You know, you've got to think about the people you're dealing with. Yeah. Understand your team as human beings, because they can't deliver excellence all the time, and they might have issues going on, you know, and that's when trust becomes important, I think. So I think over the years my leadership style has adjusted a bit from the time I was captain of Leicestershire up to being director of sport at St Paul's, and in between at Marlborough College. It was only recently I read an article about Leicestershire County Cricket Club winning the championship in 1996 under James Whittaker, who was my vice captain for 6 years, and there's some interesting comments, I think, within that article by two of the successful members of that team, which I hadn't really thought about too much until I read it in recent times.
Well, we've got an excerpt here of that from two people involved in it. The first is Paul Nixon. So he says that Nigel Briers, who was captain until 1996, and John Birkinshaw had built a good squad together. They were both fascinated by the game, and they enjoyed each other's successes and the successes of everyone in the team. Nigel was very much a pragmatic leader. He would say, we're doing it this way, and we would.
Yeah, so here was a young side brought together. You know, Jack Birkinshaw made some shrewd signings, which needed to gain experience and have some standards set at a foundation level. You know, quite inexperienced, quite young. It was it was about building some sort of performance environment.
But then Darren Maddy went on to say that Nigel was a sergeant major. He instilled discipline. He got the best out of everyone through hard work, good preparation and mental toughness. He led from the front, and that's what the club needed. With Nigel, it was very much his way, whereas Jimmy Whittaker, who was captain in '96, was much more inclusive. He was only able to trust players because they had that discipline installed. It reminds me of the transition between Nasser Hussain and Michael Vaughan, who took over an England team who had 4 or 5 years of strong discipline, so he could be more relaxed and create a different environment.
Yeah, it's quite interesting that. And when I read it, it actually made me reflect on things. I thought, "Christ, was that bad? You know, like, was that Sergeant Major?" I mean, they were great lads. Paul Nixon, he's the coach at Leicester now, and Darren Maddy went on to play for Warwickshire and a bit for England. So, Darren, I used to thought they called him Gazza. You see, you know, Gascoigne were playing football at the time. I thought, because I heard him say Gazza, you know, how's Gazza? And it was only a couple of years later, and everyone used to giggle when I used to say Gazza. And Nico eventually said to me, Paul Nick, he said, it's Dazza. You always call him Gazza, but it's Dazza. And I said to Darren, I said, well, why the hell didn't you tell me? He said, I was too scared to. You know, like it was... I think I think that was right. I think I was the right person at the right time with that team, and then the change of leadership with James taking it over, and the way he led it, and giving them more autonomy and making them think for themselves a bit more, and that was a great thing. And that combination, I think, worked for Leicestershire and winning in '96. Now, and probably that was the best way to go at that time. But I think I had a similar approach at Marlborough College as head of cricket and director of sport. I think once I felt the groundwork was complete and the standards and expectations set, I think, and everyone had direction, I sort of encouraged that greater autonomy amongst the heads of sport, to create the right environment, get the best people in and trust them to make decisions. And if you've got the best people there and you just let them go with it, and there's no point employing talented people and then inhibiting them and micromanaging their work. If you've got the best people, give them the wings to fly, let them go a bit. So, and at St Paul's, I felt I laid the foundation for cricket in the first few years, and then the coaches knew what the standards were, and same in the director of sport role. I feel I set out what I thought was the right philosophy, but more and more encourage individual heads of sport to think for themselves. So I think in the latter part of my career, I because the foundation's there and everything, I actually did adapt to all that. I wasn't like the Sergeant Major sort, getting them to make more decisions, having the best people under you makes a difference, and I could trust their judgment, and that's where the trust is, isn't it? And one's leadership style needs to change and be flexible to cope with the individuals who you oversee and the current state of the team or business, because it's a similar thing. So your flexibility as a leader needs to be there, depending on the people you've got. You create the culture, let the individuals buy into that culture, and then let them go to a certain extent. I mean, even as head of cricket at school, it's not just about leading the team. It's about embracing the other cricket staff, the catering staff, the ground staff, the S&C coach, the cleaners of the pavilion, the estate staff, the security staff. I try to embrace, they were all part of cricket. They all made that cricket, that feeling, that environment. They all became interested in. They want some, if I sent the results around, the security staff want to see the results from Saturday and things like that. So making them part of the environment and treating them with status and respect, whatever job they were doing, they were all part of that cricket team in that performance environment.
Really interesting, Nigel. Thanks for sharing that with us. Most of our listeners are kind of split into probably, I'd say, 4 categories. We've got athletes of all different levels, coaches, lots of teachers, and parents as well. All have an involvement in sport to some degree. So what would you say that your top resources are for information that they might be able to also use?
Yeah, quite varied. Real life scenarios and people you learn from others. I think I said earlier, and meeting people in different ways, in different circumstances, and you learn from them, even if it's not what to do. You can still learn from that. Various articles or video clips. I saw one most recently. I saw Gary Kirsten, the former South African Test batsman and successful coach with India a while back, and I listened to him, and he made some really good points. I'd agree with what Gary Kirsten said. Actually, he said that I think there are different leadership styles, and anyone can become a better leader. It's a learned behaviour, but it needs a lot of self-discovery and growth. And I think what he said, that's what he said, and I think that's really quite important. It's not a quick fix. However, I found that many of the best leaders I've come across have a certain mystique about them, a certain presence, almost like a sixth sense. You can't, you just meet people like that. And the 2 headmasters I talked about earlier, St Paul's and Marlborough, they just had something there. And
yeah.
You listened. And I've read some Good books. John Wooden, he lived to about 99 or 100 years old. Top basketball coach in the United States. He's got a good book on leadership. I enjoyed reading that. Another American, Bill Walsh, who wrote The Score Takes Care of Itself. You know, like if you put all the effort in, and same with John Wooden really. If all the effort goes in, you don't have to worry about winning and losing. The score will take care of itself because you're working hard. You're in the right place. I enjoyed James Kerr's book Legacy, which was about the All Blacks and their mentality and cleaning the changing room when they've been in it and things like that. Even if you're the captain, Ricky McCaw, you know, it was like he still chips in and does the job. And funny enough, it's always something I've done with cricket teams, whether I was at Mulberry. Even before I read that book, I make them clean you know, don't think you're above doing this. You know, I don't want the cleaner coming in on Monday morning using your mess. You've made it, you clean it up. And that discipline, that team environment. But also, you know, I've read historical biographies like Churchill, but I've also enjoyed Nelson and Napoleon. Nelson, actually, one of the great things, his care of his men, or even promoting them, even though he was losing good people, I kind of like that. You know, losing good people, but he wanted to go on because it almost like he had helped them and they'd become better, higher up, higher ranking, or whatever. I mean, he cared about them. You know, there was another person who cared about how they were as people, and so even reading story, you know, they're not necessarily sporty people, but that leadership aspect of it. I think the other thing that, because it was more recently, I watched this video of Gary Kirsten. He mentioned about how long do you allow an environment to fail before it becomes successful, which is quite an interesting one, because you can't just have instant success, and sometimes you've got to stick with your players or the routines or whatever it is, because you think you've got the best players and you just got to stick with it, even though they might be struggling, because you don't want to be chopping and changing too quickly. I think then the key thing is how long do you persist with that? Mm-hmm. How long do you go? So I thought even recently I've sort of picked that up, and always learning. I think that's one thing I would say to people in, you know, looking for leadership roles or involved in business is you don't always think you know it all. You're always learning from all sorts of people.
So we've discussed many different things over the last 30 to 40 minutes. What kind of closing statement or advice would you give someone that can be applied to anything really in terms of performance, whether it's in life, leadership, business or sport?
Yeah, a lot of the leadership stuff is about life, isn't it, and business you can equate. So for me, I think I try and encourage people, even, you know, the best players, the boys even at school, you know, like, be humble. I'm not sure I always have been at times, but I think it's something that you learn and look at and think, I need to be better at that. And as time goes on, I think I become better in that way. And so I think being humble, be the best you can be. You know, don't leave a stone unturned. There's lots to unlock. People have got lots of potential. So be the best you can be. Show courage, not just physical courage, like if you're facing the quick bowlers or something, but I think making decisions, again in business or sport, that mentality, you've got to be strong and show the courage to make the decisions. Respect all but fear none. You know, don't be fazed by people, but show respect. I think enthusiasm and energy go a long way. I think I've always been blessed with energy. Still pretty good in that way, and probably linked with all that, enjoy the journey.
Yeah, I completely agree with everything you just said there, especially the last thing. I think there's lots of people that I've met, I've worked with who don't, and I think it's very obvious to other people, not necessarily as obvious to them, but enjoyment is key really, for so many different reasons.
Yeah, I think there were times when I didn't enjoy playing cricket, and it was a tough it was a tough environment even back then, and not the scrutiny that they've got now, but there were times, and I look back, and those times when my confidence went, I think, why was I like that? If I'd have known this now, and I think that's the thing. Some people just deal with it better than others, and that confidence thing. So I think enjoyment. You've got to enjoy. All right, make mistakes. I'm going to enjoy making them better.
Yeah, fantastic. So just before we close out, I'd just like to thank you very much for your time, for coming on the show. It's really, really interesting discussion. If people wanted to get in touch with you, maybe ask some follow-up questions, what's the best way that they can do that?
Well, it's probably because I'm still working at St Paul's School with some cricket. I think my email address there, which is nb@stpaulschool.org.uk, is probably the best way.
Great. Right, I'll put that in the show notes. So if all listeners want to contact Nigel and ask him anything, and please feel free to send an email, and you can find that in the show notes below. But Nigel, thanks again for your time and for coming on today.
Yeah, no, it's been a pleasure. I've enjoyed it, and thanks for interviewing me.
Thanks for listening to the 38th episode. We hope you enjoyed the show. It would really help us out if you could please leave a rating and or review on whatever platform you're listening on. Be sure to check out our website, www.extremesportsperformance.com, that has details about our consultancy services, our in-person and online store, our in-person and online education, our media pages, our contact details, and how to subscribe for free to stay informed about company news and updates. Join our social media community on LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube and Twitter. Links to these can be found at the bottom of all our pages on our website and via any search engine. Until next time, take care.